Wall Street Journal that they're suggesting that the season, the sort of Christmas holidays and what have you, are going to be as bad, if not worse, than the worst of the pandemic supply chain problems. I didn't read the full article, but it's just extraordinary to think that we're actually getting ourselves out of this, and the aftershock is still so extensive. So, it's crazy. But at least today we can drink some wine.
We need to have at least some wine.
Yes, exactly. Have you heard anything about Vinitalia for next year? Have they made any kind of preliminary discussions about that?
It's on next week.
All the entire event?
Yep. They cut it back to 3 days and it's on next week.
They're planning it. They have a huge need, as also ProWine, to prove the world that they can do an event and that those events are still needed.
Right.
Yeah, for instance, we were given invitations to next week, but it's just impossible at the moment for us to get there. But I would love to, but impossible. Barbara, are you guys going to Verona next week or not?
No, we won't.
All right.
We won't. So far, also the Opera Wine, which was in July in Verona, it's just not working. People are not coming. And being there and nobody's coming is somehow very frustrating. So we do hope that we can achieve or attend again this kind of tasting next year. And of course, we do hope that people are coming. I mean, we have actually quite a lot of importers asking us what's going on next year. Yeah. So quite a few do have already doubts if they can come and if they want to come. Let's see.
I'm sure a lot of people would like to go, but with quarantine regulations either on the European side or on our side, see, for us, the problem is I could go. There'd be no problem with quarantine in Italy, but at the moment, when I come back here, I'd have to do 10 days quarantine. So now that's not going to be a problem in 2 weeks' time.
No, but so I mean, they do speak about ProWine that they want to do it 5 days, and they want to that interest a few people. But I mean, do I have to go there, 3 people of us, 5 days, and seeing not even 50% of what we did before? I mean, it's just also extremely expensive for what?
Yeah.
And the same thing on your side, going there, not only just a few days, but much more, struggling to do your whole program, which was already before not easy, and now it will be close to impossible. Spending a lot of money and doing a not really great job. It's just not. There's no sense. So I think we will have to see what's going on. For me, it's not clear yet if they are able to do it or not. I'm very curious to see how also the wine experience will be next week. There won't be hardly any wineries attending in person.
So what's the point?
I don't know.
They have a huge need, because if another year goes around without those events, we will all learn that we can do it in a less expensive way, and probably even, at least not worse, probably even better something.
So you think it's the organizers with the vested interest?
Sort of makes sense.
We'll see.
I have to say, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I prefer much more to be with you at the same table. But I have to say that if I compare some online tastings we are doing, people are more concentrated. There is more focus. Generally speaking, we as a winery, but also the guests, to take more time than at the wine event. At a wine event like ProWine or Vinitalia, you have probably a meeting of half an hour, and most of the time you're like distracted because other people are passing by. Online tastings normally are at least an hour. People are just listening to you are listening to the people. So it's actually, there are some positive parts, but and it costs like nothing if you compare it with traveling to somewhere.
Sure.
Changing times. Anyway, it's 7 o'clock. Let's kick it off. Barbara, thanks so much for joining us tonight. This is not the first tasting we've done online, and from the sounds of what you have just been saying to us, it's probably not going to be the last, no matter what happens to the wine world. The winery, for those who have never met you before, the winery started in 1981. It was 40 years old in 2018. It was quite a year for Brancaia, because not only was the winery 40 years old, but you turned 50, which I see on the website. Still don't look a day over 40, so congratulations. It must be all that Sangiovese that's flowing Absolutely. Through you. So I'm going to hand over to Barbara, because she has a presentation which we're going to do in conjunction with the wines tonight. So over to you, Barbara.
So Robert, of course, thank you for this beautiful introduction, and thanks to everybody for your interest in Brancaia. I really want to go very quickly through a presentation which just to show you a little bit what we are, who we are, and where we are. And of course, in the end, whenever you have any questions, just let us know, and we are be more than pleased to answer them. If I do speak about Brancaia, of course, I want to speak also about my parents, because as Robert just mentioned, everything started 40 years ago, and it started thanks to my parents. We are a Swiss family, and we went to Tuscany just to spend our Christmas holiday in 1981. They fall in love with the region, with the people, the culture, of course, also with the food and wine, and thought it would be lovely to have a holiday house there. From Zurich to Tuscany, it's like a 7-hour drive by car, so a perfect spot for a holiday house. Just a few days later, they really purchased a hill, and on the hill there was a house on the top of the hill with the name Brancaia, and around there were some hectares of vineyards. The day after they purchased this house, they realized, of course, that they not only have a holiday house but a small winery, and they had two new dreams. One of the dreams was to be able to produce a high quality wine which will be known all over the world, and the second dream was that this could be a beautiful start for a family business. So far, it looks that they succeeded with both of those dreams. Brancaia is known all over the world for its quality. I personally are in charge of the winemaking and as a CEO since 22 years. And there is already some interest in the next generation. So it really looks like at least those two dreams of my parents has become true. So just to give you a very quick overview what we achieved in the last 40 years. So this one spot they purchased with the name Brancaia are today 3 spots. 2 of them are in the Chianti Classico region, in Rada, as well as in Chianti, Castellina and Chianti, and the 3rd spot is in the Maremma. That's the south coast of Tuscany. Those 7 hectares of vineyards, which were in really bad shape, are today 80 hectares, 40 of them in the Chianti Classico region and the other 40 in the Maremma. The roughly 20,000 bottles we produced at that time are today in average all spots together around 700,000 bottles, and 3 people taking care about more or less our garden are today an expert team of 32 persons the whole year round. And of course, we do have some extra people for picking and pruning and some other peak times during the year. And the 2 home markets we have, which means home markets, of course, Italy, but even much more important at the time was Switzerland. My parents, they cooked risotto at home and invited a lot of friends to sell the wines, are today 445 markets all over the world. And the 2 wines we produced in the beginning, which was the Riserva and the Chianti Classico Anato, is today a portfolio of 9 wines, and most of them we will taste together today. So just there also quickly that you have more an idea, a graphic idea where those spots are. The two spots in the Chianti Classico regions are between Florence and Siena, so more in the countryside from Tuscany. And if you compare the climate, of course, they have a similar climate to each other, but the microclimate, as Tuscany is very hilly, is quite different. And then you just go south, 100 kilometers south, and very close to the coast, not even 10 kilometers, you will find our spot in the Maremma. There you can see all three spots do have different sea levels, and of course at the coast we do have a different microclimate, we have different soils, we focus also, of course, also on different varieties. So it's still very close by. I can drive there in a bit more than an hour. So with the same philosophy we can achieve really different grape qualities, grape character, and have a much bigger diversity in the cellar, which we of course use to have a beautiful diversity in our wines. Some of our wines will be a mix of those regions, some are just from one or two of those spots.
Barbara, can I ask you, the Maremma coast, is that considered part of Bulgari as a region?
No, Bulgari would be like here. So Bulgari is
far further north,
much smaller than Maremma.
Right.
And it's more north coast of Tuscany.
Right.
There's something very important to underline. Bulgari is very famous as a wine region. Today, Maremma is not yet so famous. Maremma is, as well as Bulgari, are not originally wine regions. So 100 years ago, there was no wine production in Maremma nor in Bulgari. Bulgari was famous for fruit and vegetable production. It's a bit cooler and it does have much more water than the Maremma. Maremma was famous, and it is still, for the meat production and milk. And they had Maremma at very close to the coast. They had a malaria issue 100 years ago. So when the rich people from Tuscany started to think about why not trying also to make wines at the coast, they started in Bulgari because they had their summer holiday houses at the coast in Bulgari and not in Maremma.
Right.
Looked at today, both are beautiful wine regions, and I'm totally convinced that you will hear more and more about the Maremma. Maremma does have a huge potential, and we will taste today actually two wines from the Maremma. And I hope, of course, you will agree with me that the wines from these regions are just outstanding.
Terrific, thanks.
This is just, by the way, is the spot in Rada in Chianti, and that's also the spot where I do live. In the wine industry, we speak very often about terroir, and also at Brancaia, terroir for us is, of course, a very important point. I just want to underline what it does mean for us. It means that our wines are connected with the soil. It means that we try to produce grapes which do have a very strong link to the spot where they do grow. This makes the quality and the character of our grape unique, and therefore, of course, also our wines. To achieve this uniqueness, of course, we are connecting with soils, and we do have these 3 pictures for you just to show a little bit the diversity. In reality, the diversity is much bigger. That means that in each single spot, we have 3 up to 5 different soils type. But just to give you a little idea, in Castellina, the wines, they will have a lot of fruit flavors. They are pretty long body, quite intense structure. In Rada, generally speaking, you will have a higher acidity. They will be a bit fresher and mostly a bit more elegant. In the Maremma, you have a lot of power and extremely smooth tannins, and you have to be very attentive, not losing the acidity. You need to have still a certain elegance in the wine. But just one last little point before we will start to taste. At Brancaia, now since 2019, we are officially organic. It's not only about agriculture when we do speak or when we want to underline the importance of the sustainability. Sustainability is something we do look in a 360-degree way. So we believe that whatever we are doing, if it's in the office, if it's how we do heat or how we do clean our water, it's always on an optic, can we do it better and with the maximum of respect to nature. This timeline just should show you that this is a matter we are focusing on it already for many years. We do moderate our carbon footprint with an external institute since 2014. Of course, it was already negative at that time, but with lowering the bottle weight, with changing the packaging, we were able even to improve. And of course, it goes without saying that this timeline is not at an end. That's something which goes on and on and on, and there is still space to improve. Regarding our way how we do produce grapes, as I just mentioned in the beginning, it's now organic, but already there, most of the works we are doing in the vineyards are already also totally conform with the biodynamic agriculture. As I promised, I tried to do it very short.
Perfecto, 11 minutes. It's sensational.
So let's start the tasting. It's just, as an image, from the portfolio, just should show you a quick view on our label, which of course is always the same. So just changing colors, which makes it very easy to recognize that it is a Brancaia wine.
Yeah, in fact, I remember knowing Brancaia without registering that I knew Brancaia back in the day. I remember the logo, I remember the label, I don't even know where I saw it, but it's such a forceful, no-nonsense, memorable logo. It definitely works, for sure.
I will lose some more words about the packaging when we come to the Brancaia Il Blu. Because of course, as you just mentioned, it is quite unique and very important to us.
But Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong, your parents were in advertising, were they not?
My dad was an owner of an advertising agency in Switzerland. And so when they added Il Blu to our portfolio, which was in '88, they used this new type of wine also to rethink about our image. And whoever comes to us once will see that we have a beautiful house, but it's not the castle. There was, of course, no family history in winemaking. So he started to think about what can we do, which is Brancaia, which does have a strong meaning to us. And this was somehow, let's say, design, graphic. And so he and his art director just did something which was at that time quite shocking and definitely very new. It's not shopping anymore, but it's still, I don't know if it's new, but it's still unique.
A new classic.
Yeah, it's timeless, you know. And from our personal point of view, we do think it's timeless. It's somehow modern. It's elegant and it's unique. And of course, we do hope that our wines are the same.
Yeah, for those of you who ever get the pleasure of going to the winery in Castellina, which I was in Castellari, sorry, I was privileged enough to be there about 3 years ago. You go down this treacherous dirt road, and then you finally get to this amazing building, which is all this stonework. But when you walk inside, be prepared for psychedelia, because there's purple, there's orange, there's yellows. What you don't see claret colors and white wine colors. The place is an assault on the senses. It's very different, that's for sure.
Okay, so we're tasting the SBV. What percent? Oh, 90% Sauvignon Blanc.
Yes. Our Il Bianco 2020 is mainly a Sauvignon Blanc with 90%, and there is 10% Viognier. The Sauvignon Blanc grapes are coming from Castellina in Chianti, and the Viognier is coming from our Maremma estate. So we do mix the two spots.
I'm imagining that Viognier is coming off that rocky soil that you spoke about in the previous image, that middle one, Raba,
Yes.
or whatever it's called. Yeah. Okay.
It gives a bit more structure to the wine, but you will have in the nose, in the mouth, a Sauvignon Blanc mainly. Okay. I have to tell you, I was not a huge fan of white wines in Tuscany. Very often the white wines in Tuscany had too much alcohol and not enough acidity. And it goes without saying that we wanted to do it in a different way. So this wine is quite fresh. It really it does have a certain structure, so it's no need to drink it right now. You can, of course, but even if you want to keep it for some years in the cellar, that's perfectly fine. We do pick those grapes only in the morning hours to get them as cool as possible into the cellar. In the cellar, they will have about 12 hours skin contact to get a bit more structure into it, and then it will have a very slow fermentation on 16 degrees, so pretty cool. And afterwards, it won't make the malolactic fermentation to keep the acidity as high as possible.
Right.
And then
I see you did a third in barrique though, so there's going to be some tannic form to the wine.
Yeah, but it's all already used oak. So
Okay,
you
so
will
very neutral.
on the very, very back end, you will have some wood flavors, but very, very gentle.
Gooseberry and grapefruit sounds perfect to me. Lou, what do you think?
It's certainly not Sancerre style. It's
Okay.
more the modern style that we're used to out of the New World.
Yeah.
But it's all about, I got a lot of pineapple, I got to say. I got pineapple, and that middle range of Sauvignon Blanc, away from the green, away from the orange, is right in the middle. So that sweet spot is nice. The Viognier adds a little bit of body and I suppose tones down the overt acidity that Sauvignon Blanc can get. It's pleasant, really easy drinking.
Yeah, it's easy drinking. It's from our point of view, we have this, let's say, entry level wine with the white wine, rosé, and the trait, and it fits perfectly in it. It's there is structure, there is character, but it's easy.
Yep.
Bueno, let's move on to wine number 2. I'm excited to see what everyone thinks about this because this is the first time we've had it. The Cabernet number, this is the wrong slide.
Oh, you are with the number 2, not with the tray?
Yeah. No, if you want to do tray first, no problem. Guys, that's jar number 4.
Number 4?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Robert. That's
no problem.
That's the slide I have, and I honestly do think it makes more sense to taste first the tray and then number 2, because you will see in a second number 2 there is more power than with the tray.
Okay.
I just mentioned before the Il Bianco, the tray is our red wine, which we in the Brancaia world, we consider as our entry-level wine, but believe me, it's a pretty serious entry-level wine.
I mean, looking at that Monica Lana quote that you've got on the screen, entry-level wines don't get better than this. That kind of says it. And looking further at Lana's, Suckling's notes on this 19 that we're tasting tonight, the 2 words that really jump out is polished and classy. It's something that's always been a stamp for me when tasting the tray. It's great to see that 19s come through well for you.
It's a beautiful wine with all what you're looking for in a serious red wine without being complicated. Tre, by the way, means in Italian free, and of course we do have good reasons to call it tre. It is a blend of the 3 spots we do have, so Castellina and Rada, as well as Maremma. And in the meantime, it's also a blend of the 3 grapes, Sangiovese, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon. It matures for 12 months, 2/3 in tonneau, so small barrels, and 1/3 in concrete. I'm personally a huge fan about concrete, the modern concrete. That means that the wine does have a direct contact with the concrete. It really gives
the textural thing, right?
Yeah, it makes the tannins a little bit smoother, so the wine is, even if it's very young, so drinkable, and it really keeps all the freshness, all the beautiful fruit flavors, just as it should be. And for me, this wine is really an all-rounder. You can drink it without food, you can drink it with any kind of cuisine. And in the summer, when it's warm outside, I would recommend you even to drink it a bit cooler. There is nothing bad about that.
The classic markers for me have always been leather, tea, and very much leaning into the dark fruit of the Sangiovese. I see that this vintage is 80% Sangiovese. It doesn't really vary, does it? It's usually, that vastly dominant Sangiovese.
You have about 2/3 of the grapes coming from the Maremma, and in the Maremma you have a bit more deepness, and you have these very round, smoothie tannins, which makes this wine just so beautiful.
Okay, let's have a look at number 3. Where do you want to go next? In terms of
Let me find out.
Yeah, I mean, okay, the Riserva. So that's lucky number 3, jar number 3.
Just to tell you about the order, it makes really sense, because we go to the wine which is produced, of course, 100% from grapes from the Chianti Classico region. So we go into the countryside from Tuscany, and afterwards we will have 2 wines which are produced 100% from the coast, from the Maremma. So, but now focus on this beautiful Riserva. This is, from our point of view, the best what we can do with the Sangiovese grape. It is 80% Sangiovese with 20 Merlot. So we do blend it the max of what we can do for this region. And the wine was matured for 60 months in oak. The Sangiovese in Tonneau. So Tonneau does have a volume of 500 liter, and the Merlot will go into the smaller barrels, what we call a barrique. As barrels, we use only French oak, and the toasting will be plus, medium plus. In all our wines, we are always looking for the balance. So nothing should be dominant, nor the alcohol, nor, of course, the acidity, nor the wood flavors. So we really try to integrate those wood flavors in a way that they're just very nicely in the background and never dominant.
We're also very fortunate to have 16 currently, which I'm sure will be the last that we'll get from you of 2016 of the Chianti Classico Riserva. Exceptionally good year for Brancaia and for Tuscany in general. So from a purchasing point of view, I would be leaning into this tonight, because it's probably the last time we'll see this at $55 a bottle. Back to you, Barbara.
Well, then we go finally to number 2.
We're there.
You wanted to just one second to this picture. This is, by the way, the view you have from our estate in the Maremma. Unfortunately, it's very white in the horizon, but there is just the sea. And on the bottom, this water is our lake. So on each property, we do have some lakes if it's needed, which in the Maremma spot, of course, is very often the case that we need irrigation. We need irrigation in the Maremma for the Sangiovese and for the Merlot. Those grapes won't mature by dry farming. We are not big fans about dry farming. We believe that we can achieve the link with the soil much better if a grape matures by dry farming. And with our experience from the last 20 years, we have learned that the Cabernet Sauvignon, the Petit Verdot, and the Cabernet Franc mature perfectly well in the Maremma without irrigation. And that's
Looking
why
at the site you've got is fantastic, because it reminds me a little bit of Franschhoek in South Africa, where the onshore mist off the ocean should actually probably curl over that mountain onto your vines. It must be absolutely fantastic for that kind of impact of the vine ripening.
It's
really
beautiful.
beautiful.
We have, of course, a much bigger difference between day and night temperature in the Maremma than in the Chianti Classico region, which really gives you those very powerful wines and the very smooth tannins. But in number 2, we do focus on the Cabernet Sauvignon, which I just mentioned, matures extremely well in the Maremma. This is legally, it's a Maremma Toscana DOCG. We call this wine number 2 because it's somehow the second label of the wine you will taste afterwards. So it's like the little brother, but I'm pretty sure when you taste the wine, you will agree with me that this is a very serious little brother. So
as most second siblings are. It's at a very good price point with us at $45. James Suckling 91 points, although I see you've referenced it as 92. Maybe I've got my data wrong with that. At 92, even better. This is the first time that we've been able to bring this in, so I'm really excited to get some feedback from the people about what they think about this.
It's I think again we really deliver a lot of wine. It's full body, it's smooth, silky, and it does have really this typicity from the Maremma, but in a very elegant way. You can feel the heat, the sun, but there is still also a nice acidity which cleans your mouth, which gives you really this like, oh, would be cool to have a next sip, which makes it also quite friendly to pair with food. Of course, I would go more with the grilled meat now. So there is also, you can also have some spiciness with in your food with this wine. It does have all the structural, the shoulders to have a real nice beefsteak or whatever next to this wine.
No, Barbara, you're absolutely right. In terms of structure, it's all there. This is the first time I'm having this wine in a long, long time. And I remember when I first tried it, I could not distinctly identify it as a Cabernet. It is a unique expression of Cabernet. If you're going looking for Bordeaux equivalents, you're not going to find it here. If you're looking for New World equivalents, you're not going to find it here. It's a distinct, I assume this is the terroir that's giving it its distinct character, because it's not like any other Cabernet I've had out of Italy before. It really isn't. It's quite unique.
Hello, I'm truly happy that you're saying that, because when we started with this wine in 2015, we actually called it not number 2, but Cabernet Sauvignon. We were saying, well, that's cool, you know, that's so easy. Everybody just knows what it is. And then we started to realize that this was a big mistake, because everybody does have so clear ideas how a Cabernet Sauvignon has to be, in a good way, in a bad way.
They couldn't draft it.
Yeah, and then you tasted the wine as well. I already know how it tastes. I don't like Cabernet Sauvignons, or I like Cabernet Sauvignons only from Napa Valley or whatever. So we realized that we have to get rid of this name and just make people again curious what it is. And number 2 was a very good choice, because when you go and have a sip, it's not that we do hide it, you know, on the back label you will see it's a Cabernet Sauvignon, but give this wine a chance, because I'm extremely convinced that you will love it. It's really a cool wine. It's great.
I think Sam defines it really well by calling it super elegant and fresh. Those aren't descriptors that you normally find in a wine. So somehow you've nailed both those contrasting elements in one bottle. Sorry, Lou.
Well, I have to say, Lou, but there was something you wanted to add?
No, I was just saying, with it's beguiling. It's a little bit deceptive insofar as if you walked up and saw a Cabernet Sauvignon label with your preconceived notion of what should then follow in the glass, this would scare you, or at least surprise you, because it doesn't meet expectations of what you would have anticipated. Hey, it's different. It's a very different expression of Cabernet, no doubt about it.
Fantastic. Shall we move? I'm putting my money behind the Ilatraia 17 being in jar 5, being in your next slide.
It is.
Oh,
It is.
I nailed it. 1 out of 6.
Was
I should go and buy a lottery ticket.
really, Robert. We are now on track.
So if anyone's got screaming children in the background, it's we're now on jar 5. So the Ilatraia.
So with the Ilatraia, we are tasting now, let's say, the big brother of number 2. So we are still in the Maremma. And there's still quite a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon in this wine, but the other really important part of this wine is Petit Verdot. So you have a blend of 40% Petit Verdot, 40 Cabernet Sauvignon, and 20 Cabernet Franc. I mentioned it when we spoke about number 2. We do focus on these grape varieties in the Maremma spot because those do mature perfectly well every year by dry farming. That means those varieties really do feel at home. And I'm pretty sure when you taste this wine, you won't have a Bordeaux wine in your mouth. Okay, it's not in the nose nor in the mouth. It's really Maremma. A lot of power, a lot of structure, but also there you still have a certain freshness, a certain acidity, which, by the way, is never easy in Maremma. And with vintage 2017, which was a very hot and dry vintage, even more than normal, it's really. I have to say that we are very happy that we were able to achieve such a nice and great wine with this vintage. It's due to what we do know today, how to handle heat, but it's also thanks to our vineyards, which in the meantime do have a certain age. There is no doubt about, as older wine is, as more it is linked to its spot, as better it can handle weather extreme, and as more interesting gets the grape. And so Ilatraia 2017, a wine which matures 18 months in barrels, about half of them you have used. A lot of power, a lot of structure, and as all our wines, we make wines because, you know, in Europe, you always have food with wine. You hardly ever drink a bottle of wine without food. So we like to have them in a way that you can easily pair them with food.
Dave has asked a really good question, and I'm glad you have, Dave, because I'm so obsessed with Petit Verdot. It's when it's good, it's very, very good, but when it's bad, it's awful. And so I just love to taste examples of Verdot when people get it right. Dave's asking, does the content of the Verdot increase the aging ability of the wine?
Sorry, does
the question from Dave is, does the contribution of the Petit Verdot add to this the cellaring or aging potential of the wine?
Well, you know, first of all, I'm of course totally right with Robert. If a grape variety finds its perfect home, then it's just perfect. And Petit Verdot, which is considered in Bordeaux as a grape variety which doesn't mature every year as its perfection, quite difficult at our spot, at our winery in the Maremma. I shouldn't say that, but it's just true. It's the most easiest one, okay? It matures every year, absolutely perfect without irrigation. I have to say, even the quantity is not so small. So it really fits perfectly there. On the impact of how long a wine can mature with Petit Verdot, if it can mature longer or less long, my experience with Petit Verdot is now 22 years old or young. So older than that, unfortunately, I won't be able to answer you the question, but for those years I can speak. I do think it adds a lot to it, and I couldn't tell you now the end of the aging potential. So at least 22 years without problems, with still the feeling when I do taste today the first wines, and if I do speak about first wine, I speak about wine produced from very young wines. So there is, for me, no doubt about that. What we were able to do in the last years has to be better as an aging potential than what we did in the early years. So if I have to say something, I would say, from my personal point of view, what I know today, there is no question that Petit Verdot can age very well.
It's really great, because my experience is so often that it's the final piece of a Bordeaux blend. It's that 5% or that 10% that's at the back end of the blend, just to give color and perfume. It's wonderful to see it front row center in this example. This has always been my favorite thing I always reach for in your lineup. I love it. So let's go on to the final wine now, the Il Blu, the 18.
So Il Blu, give me just a minute or two to speak a bit about the packaging. Of course, we already spoke about before that my father designed this label 30 years ago. And of course, when we thought about the anniversary edition, we thought about, okay, what shall we do? Shall we ask an artist? What can we do which is somehow different? And then it was quite fast, it was clear that we wanted to do, which was still very typical Il Blu. We are still very much in love with our label, so we didn't really want to do something which was not linked anymore to our label. And then of course, if you know our label and you want to do something which is very much linked, there is not so much left you can do as a special edition, but the few things you can do with it. That means for the first time, we wrapped our bottle. There are actually two different type of wrapping papers, and both of them, of course, very much Brancaia, very simple and easy. We changed the paper of our label. Normally, the Brancaia label was a paper without any structure. This time it does have structure, which gives us the feeling of more earthy, of more value, of more elegance. And then, of course, the square has become golden instead of black. And then there are just little things like our Brancaia word in the glass on the top of the bottle as well as on the bottom. And then the whole packaging in the wood box. And in the wood box, for the first time, we added a corten steel black logo, which hopefully will age as beautiful as the wine in the bottle. And then, of course,
with packaging as gorgeous as this, creates such a nightmare for me, because everyone who orders this tonight is going to insist on boxes. I can hear it already. It's coming. It's very beautiful, Barbara. Congratulations. Gorgeous.
Well, come to Tuscany and and get a wood case from the winery. Now, it's of course, when we do speak about wine, we want to speak about the quality in the bottle, but it goes without saying that all of us, we do also see things and we touch things, so it's right that we give also the importance to the packaging. And I do really think that we achieved with the packaging of the 18 a new level of elegance and of value. But again, as I mentioned, the most important thing, of course, is the quality in the bottle. I have to say that we are more than happy that we can celebrate this anniversary with the vintage 2018, because 2018 was a beautiful year. From our personal point of view, we achieved the quality of the Merlot grapes, which is a quality we never ever achieved before, especially in Radda and Chianti. So the Merlot you have in this blend, which is 80%, is all grapes from Radda in Chianti, and then you have 10% Sangiovese and 10% Cabernet Sauvignon. There are a few changes we did with the vintage 2018. We increased again a little bit the Merlot. It was already before blend dominated by Merlot, but we increased the Merlot part because it was just so delicious. We decreased slightly the maturation in the barrels. It used to be 20 months with the 2018. We stopped the barrel aging after 18 months. Afterwards, as always, we tasted each single barrique So each single variety, each single block, all aged and matured separately. We are doing our final tasting, which is, let's say, the last quality control before we do the blend of the whole quantity. And then also a new step for us. After the blend of the whole quantity, we added an aging for 3 months in concrete tanks. This gives all the single barriques some time just to get together, to expose each other perfectly. And when you want to taste the wine like we are doing right now, or in the next few years, you will have a wine which is already more ready to drink. It's not that you can't age it anymore. You can, the aging potential is still the same, but the opportunity to enjoy it right now is definitely higher and better than it used to be.
Do you reckon this focus into concrete tanks will be used more and more in the Chianti region? Are people adopting it rapidly, or is this something that you've done sort of on a fairly unilateral basis?
Robert, I do believe actually that concrete as a material is coming back in our industry more and more. And I want to underline that it is not the same concrete we had in the cellars in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
It's a concrete without any skin inside. Okay, but there was before, in the old fashion of concrete tanks, the wine actually didn't have a direct contact with the concrete, and today in the new versions, it does have a direct contact. So what's the difference? The difference is that if there is nothing inside, the tank can briefly breathe. So there will be a micro oxidation going on in a concrete tank of today. And if you compare it with the stainless steel, where of course you won't have any breathing, stainless steel is a metal, and the metal does interact with the wine. So if you keep a wine for a year or even longer in a stainless steel, you will lose color, you will lose flavors, and this is something that won't happen in a concrete tank. So in a concrete tank, you remain the freshness, the aromas, and at the same time, you will have the tannin slightly smoother.
Dave made an interesting comment that he sees this as more drinkable now than the Il Blu number 5. So what vintage was that? That was the 17. So it's a younger wine, but more approachable, Dave. I think he sounds off. It's interesting to see that as a
he's saying that this vintage of Il Blu is more approachable at this age than previous vintages of Il Blu.
Oh, I thought he was referencing number 5. Okay.
Yeah, I just mean, sorry. I mean, the Il Blu, the 18 seems like it's more drinkable now than earlier vintages. Or at this. Very nice.
That's really that's what we wanted to achieve. But I mean, there is also, to be very transparent, a wine is a natural product. So it always can happen that you will open a bottle and it doesn't really show up as open as it did some months before and as it would some months later. So it always can happen, unfortunately, that you open whatever, not only Brancaia, it doesn't matter what kind of wine, but we do really think that with this 3 months maturing in concrete, we achieved a drinking pleasure, a higher drinking pleasure in its young years than what it had before.
And sorry to interrupt, but you said, but it's still same ageability though, right?
If when we do speak again in 20 years, I'm even more sure.
You'll get back to us.
From a technique point of view, there is no reason why it should have less aging potential than the way we worked before. Probably if you would compare Il Blu 18 to 17, 16 or whatever in 10 years, the difference of of this new aging will disappear totally. So this impact, we actually believe, and our tests we did previous actually do prove this impact you will have in the first few years, probably in the first 4 years, and then it will be pretty much the same as the wines or as the way we worked before.
Thank you.
Barbara, could I ask regarding concrete, coming from an Italian family, concrete becomes part of your breakfast, basically. But, you know, there's a fine tradition of Italians fixing up family issues with concrete.
Yeah. And front lawns. I've seen plenty of those in Sydney.
But I remember my father, when he used to make wine in his big concrete vats, which first of all, he'd buried his enemies under and then he'd make his wine. But there was always a question of the leaching of chemicals over time from concrete into wine. Now, the sort of wine my father made never lasted more than 3 weeks in concrete anyway. He'd drink it. But long-term maturation, they obviously have changed the concrete mix, because I remember there was a whole period there where people would go in and wax the concrete tanks, and then they would put on neutral skins on the concrete, etc., to stop the interaction of the concrete with the wine itself. So it must be a different type of concrete that's being used these days, surely.
I mean, it's definitely also the concrete as itself that changed, but what the big change is, I'm not even sure if I do say this word correctly in English, and there was an insight, which I would say amyl, does exist amyl in English, which is something with glass, and which is amyl?
Enamel? I'm thinking of Eastern European.
I will check it up, and I will send you the translation.
Right,
this
great.
is a product actually, if you cut it slightly,
yep,
and if you go into a tank with the boots, and on the boots you will have a stone or whatever, you will hurt this material, and then it really gets unhealthy. So,
Barbara, if you wouldn't mind stopping the presentation, then we can get
Sure,
everyone's pictures.
absolutely.
We can see everybody. Perfect. And I'll jump out. There's a question from Dave about the dry farming philosophy. The question is, does it mean there's no irrigation at all in Maremma, even in extremely dry years?
On our property, we do have irrigation for Sangiovese and Merlot. You have to know about irrigation. Irrigation is working only if it's already installed, okay? There is no way that you can irrigate a vineyard in emergency cases. I can tell you very easily why. First of all, you need water, and in a certain moment when there is no water and you don't have a lake or whatever where you want to bring it from. But then it's also a technique thing. If you don't, it depends on the world, but in average, you will have on 1 hectare, you will have between 4,000 to 8,000 plants. At the Brancaia estate, we have in average 6,000 plants. And one wine can go, let's say, in average 5 meters into the soil to create all the roots. If this space, of course, this is just like mathematics on the paper. The reality is a bit more complex, but it gives you roughly an idea of how much water we speak. So one plant would have, if all is dry out, would have a need of 50 liters just to be totally full of water. So 50 liters per 6,000 plants for 1 hectare.
My gosh,
we do have 80
incredible.
liters. Just not feasible. So if you need irrigation, you need a system which is installed, and you have to start in spring. You have to give those plants water before they do have a real need. that you never ever dry out totally the space of their roots. The roots will be, of course, much more on the top. They never ever will go into deep. They don't need have to go down 5 meters, and that is what I want. That's why I'm not so keen about, because you have two side effects if you do irrigate. You will have a grape which matures slightly faster. If I do say slightly, we speak about a few days. And those 2 days are not missing in color, they are not missing in sugar, but you have a few days less time to for the grape to create flavors. So you will have a bit less flavors. And as the roots don't have to go into deepness, that there is no suffering, you will have flavors which are fruit flavors. Okay, they are typical for the variety, but they are not so much typical for the spot. And we are extremely keen about the flavors which are also typical for the spot. If we have a look about the wine world today, we are extremely spoiled as wine consumer, because we have great wines from all over the world. I mean, there was never so much great wines as today. So we can choose and pick from everywhere, and there are every year, fortunately, less and less bad wines. I'm, of course, a wine lover as you are, but at the same time, I'm also a wine producer. So besides the positive impact, there is, unfortunately for me, also a negative one. There never ever was so much concurrence. And what can I do different than everybody else? It's the same thing what I can do different. It's true for the other wineries. The only thing that I can do totally different than everybody else is to make my wine very much linked to the spot where I am. So my vineyards nobody else can produce at the same identical spot wine and grapes as I'm doing it. So whatever I can do to link to this spot in a specific way will make my wine unique and specific.
That is such a great way to describe it, Barbara. You know, often winemakers will talk about making site-specific wines, but I've never really made that connection in the way that you have now, in terms of creating something that's all yours because it's an expression of all your soil. It's a great way to describe it. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any more questions from anybody? No, then I have to hand over to El Jefe Guerradello for his traditional question for the winemakers.
Yes, indeed, drum roll. Now, before we go, however, we didn't have the chance to try the rosé tonight because, Barbara, as you can see, our cartons only hold 6 wines.
That's my fault.
We didn't try your rosé, but I do encourage everyone.
We will meet for rosé tasting.
Perfect.
I do encourage everyone to try Barbara's rosé. It's actually quite surprising. It's a Sangiovese rosé, and it's out of the box. It's quite different. Now, Barbara, before you leave, we always ask, when you're not drinking your own wine and you're not worried about press or paparazzi, what do you like drinking when you're alone and quiet?
Well, first of all, I love to drink other wines because, as I guess every wine lover, we need to drink different wine regions, different grape varieties. So my cellar is a mix of the whole wine world. But I have to say that my if I have a look in my cellar, it will be a bit dominated by Italian wines. It will be a bit dominated by European wines. But nevertheless, there are also wines from Australia. There are also from New Zealand. There are also from South America as well as America. Generally speaking, my personal taste, as my wines, I always looking that the wine shows a harmony. So It can be very fresh.
Barbara, you're killing me here. You're killing me.
You want one name? There is not one name.
If I'm going to give you a
There's not
present,
one name.
well,
But I have a lot of
I'm going to give you
champagnes
a
if this
present.
makes you happy.
I'm going to give you a present.
I don't have Monte in my cellar. I have champagne.
I'll give you one present. I'm going to bring one bottle. What do you want me to bring?
Oh, no, come on. I don't know.
I'll hold him to it. So
Latash, bring me a
push the
Latash.
boat out, Barbara. I'll hold him to it.
Now, I'm a big lover of Riesling. I'm really a
There it
lover
is.
of champagne.
There it is. Yeah.
There it is.
Of course, I
another
do
Riesling
think
now.
Sangiovese is an outstanding grape variety. It's outstanding because, and this goes a bit back to the uniqueness, what we spoke to before. I do think we can have great wines, great Merlots, great Cabernet Sauvignons from all over the world, but there is probably only Tuscany who can achieve a really high quality of the Sangiovese grape. But I mean, I love also Pinot Noir. I'm not a huge fan of Syrah, so now if this is something which gives you a bit more power to my answer.
I remember one year, Lou and Di and I took a trip to New Zealand, and it was ostensibly to buy Pinot Noir. So we very proudly brought gifts from the Barossa of huge ball-breaking Shirazes. And I mean, 15%ers. And we handed these wines over to the various winemakers. And I swear to God, not one of them registered a thank you. It was like, oh, yeah, thanks very much. And just put away. They knew that it was clearly not hitting home.
It was an insult. It was clearly an insult. It was.
Anyway, thank you so much, Barbara. It's been a great night talking to you. Please join us again soon. Everybody, next week is full now, but the week after we have opened more seats for the Boekenhout's Curve tasting live from Stellenbosch. If anybody wants to get into that, we're looking at 2017 versus 18 and Stellenbosch versus Franschhoek as a region. So it'll be a bit of a geeky night, but it should be quite fun. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, and hope to see you in Tuscany.
For sure. Thanks, Barbara. Take care.
I hope so.
Good night.